Is the Republican Party softening? Is JD Vance a reasonable guy? A better question, is the media trying to ruin all of our lives? My name is Brittany Page, and this is the Page Perspective. After a vacation and then a post-vacation personal crisis, I am back and happy to be here. If you're totally in the dark as to what I'm talking about, you can check out the latest episode of I Doubt It podcast, where I go into detail about the past few weeks. It's been a lot, but it's also been a lot for the news, for current events, for what we are facing as November comes closer and closer. We, of course, know that Donald Trump has picked Ohio Senator JD Vance for vice president. Some of you may know him as the author of Hillbilly Elegy, a book that later became a movie starring Amy Adams and Glenn Close, a book that is so antithetical to everything I stand for and talk about that I struggle to describe it, but I'll try. How about a nauseating, self-indulgent rewriting of one story to prop up asinine politics of personal responsibility and bootstraps? Hey, it's pretty good. So the thesis of this video is a two-parter. Number one, JD Vance is a dangerous person to advance further up the ladder of power. And two, the media is doing a poor job of informing us about the dangers that he poses. And maybe we'll start with that second point, because what is this? Seriously, what is this? JD Vance's beard? We need an entire article about his beard? This nonsense, by the way, from the same New York Times, who reported just a few days prior that JD Vance opposes a national abortion ban, which is not at all true. And sure, they've since issued a correction, but how many people read this before it was corrected? Further, how many people will then see the fact check and accommodate that new information into their understanding of who and what JD Vance is? My guess is not many, not as many as read it originally. So the resources they're dedicating to the beard coverage, we'll call it, can we get some of that for the fact-checking of his fundamental views of policy and how those views will then be implemented to restrict access to abortion across the country? Seems more important, no? One example of journalism done right is CNN's K-File, Andrew Kaczynski and M. Beck, who unearthed audio from a January 2022 podcast appearance JD Vance made, where he was asked whether he, one, supports a national abortion ban, and two, whether he thinks that something like that is possible. And I want you to hear the answer directly from him.
So Ohio has had a base of support for that. But, do you see that issue ever being resolved nationally? I know you have your own, strong personal feelings and a commitment to life in that sense. But do you think it will be resolved nationally? That's Adrian's. He was very serious about it. He was like, it's going to be resolved nationally. And I was like, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I certainly would like abortion to be illegal nationally. I don't, Adrian's like a smart lawyer, and I'm not. He definitely is.
He's great. He's great. And in the argument he gave for why it would end up that way was certain states like California could just open the floodgates to the point where something would have to be done, like life activists in California would bring litigation, and suddenly something would have to be decided if there's a national floor or something like that. So his argument is good. His argument is good in that sense. It's just my thinking has always been, and it's probably too late to put the genie back in the bottle, but I was like, a federal solution here meaning an actual state by state solution here would probably have prevented all this. But do you think that we'll get a national resolution? I'm sure you'd like a national resolution, but do you think we could do it in this climate? Think that's going to happen?
That? In this climate, short term, no. Of course, a national resolution would be impossible. But look, I guess I'm sympathetic to the view that, okay, look, here's a situation. Let's say Roe versus Wade is overruled. Ohio bans abortion, in 2022 or let's say 2024. And then, every day George Soros sends a 747 to Columbus to load up disproportionately black women to get them to go have abortions in California. And of course, the left will celebrate this as a victory for diversity. That's kind of creepy.
Health justice is when we exterminate working class black people.
Something really, exactly. Something like that could, that would be a really weird turn of events that could happen, yes.
And it's like, if that happens, do you need some federal response to prevent it from happening? Because it's really creepy. And, I'm pretty sympathetic to that, actually. So, hopefully we get to a point where Ohio bans abortion and California and the Soroses of the world respect it. But I'm sort of sympathetic to Adrian's view. And this is, certainly influenced by the fact that I'm a Christian. But, the left has this weird desire to conquer everything, right? So I tend to think that these balances are always a little tenuous, and eventually either on any given issue, the left is going to win or we're going to win.
Quote, I certainly would like abortion to be illegal nationally. Very clear. And this isn't the first time Republican candidate for Vice President JD Vance has expressed support for a national abortion ban. Look at this interview with the Cincinnati Enquirer from October 2022. Quote, to what extent should the federal government be involved in abortion policy? JD Vance responds, I'd like it to be primarily a state issue. Ohio is going to want to have a different abortion policy from California, from New York, and I think that's reasonable. I want Ohio to be able to make its own decisions, and I want Ohio's elected legislators to make those decisions. But I think it's fine to sort of set some minimum national standard. And that minimum national standard for a person who believes abortion is a moral issue, who believes abortion is murder, well, that would be a national abortion ban. And you may have seen this week that many news outlets reported that the 2024 Republican Party platform calling positions on abortion and gay marriage softened, and specifically linking that softened position to Donald Trump. And if you didn't see that, here's another prominent example among many from Savannah Guthrie from NBC talking to Eric Trump.
The Republican platform, interestingly, has moved to the center on a couple of key issues. For the first time in 40 years, the Republican platform does not call for a federal abortion ban. It no longer defines marriage as between one man and one woman, but it doesn't. So is this a sign that your father is moving to the center in some ways or on some issues?
What are we doing here? What is happening? Just last month, Senate Republicans blocked legislation that would make it a right nationwide for women to access IVF, in vitro fertilization, and other fertility treatments. The reason this was even an issue for Congress? The ruling earlier this year in Alabama from the state Supreme Court, which deemed embryos unborn children. This after reviewing a case involving the destruction of embryos at an IVF clinic. And this is where the anti-choice movement is headed. Let's read this brief portion from Bloomberg. Quote, after the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs, this has become an important new goal for the movement, to recognize fetuses and perhaps embryos as persons under the 14th Amendment. You may wonder why I'm randomly talking about the 14th Amendment after playing a clip from a reporter saying the GOP party platform has softened its position on abortion. Well, let's look at that party platform. Quote, we believe that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process. The 14th Amendment, the ultimate goal for enshrining fetal personhood into law. And I want to turn to Mother Jones and reporter Julianne McShane for this fantastic reporting on this issue. Quote, a day after the adoption of the platform, Ed Martin, president of the Phyllis Schlafly Eagles, a conservative group and one of the three people the RNC and the Trump campaign appointed to run the committee that wrote the platform, appeared to suggest on his radio show, Pro America Report, that the platform signals support for a federal abortion ban. And again, I want you to hear this for yourself.
That's an extraordinary document. Is it perfect? I don't know. Phyllis said that 2016 wasn't perfect. But it's got protections for pro-life. Don't let anybody tell you there's not protections for pro-life. There's not as many words describing it, but there's protections under the Constitution that life is protected. And although there is a call to the states to take up the arguments because the states can readily pass laws now that Roe v. Wade is eliminated, the invocation of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution and the opposition to late-term abortion, however you define that, by the way, I call a late-term abortion any abortion that is done after the baby's conceived, myself, in part because the term late-term abortion and some of the distinction of trimesters and all, that was a Roe v. Wade construct. It was made up. It was a made-up way to make us think past the sale that there's something that's not a baby, not a baby, not a baby. You get to the third trimester, now it's a baby? That's nonsense. Anyway, the pro-life stuff is great. It's strong on the issues of parental rights, on the issues of trade, on the issues of America First, on the issues of jobs. It is an extraordinary document.
Did you catch that? Although there is a call to the states, he says, the invocation of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution and the opposition to late-term abortion, which he says is all abortion, and then he kind of trails off. He's reassuring his anti-choice listeners that although there is a call to the states to set their own abortion restrictions in the post-Roe era, the platform references the 14th Amendment because that is how they will restrict access to abortion even further. And listen, I'm not even going to take time right now to go back over what they plan to do as far as the Comstock Act. I've talked about that in previous videos, so I would recommend you go check that out if you don't know what I'm talking about. This isn't a conspiracy. This is a well-oiled machine that has worked for years to ensure wins for their political goals, and they are not stopping at Roe. And don't forget, Donald Trump himself this year warned Republicans to start talking about abortion correctly. That means in a way that doesn't upset the electorate, who, in the aftermath of Roe, has been upset, leveraging those feelings into wins at the ballot box for Democrats, for abortion rights, and election after election after election. Donald Trump knows abortion rights are a threat to the Republican Party.
You must follow your heart on this issue, but remember, you must also win elections to restore our culture and, in fact, to save our country, which is currently, and very sadly, a nation in decline.
It couldn't be more clear. And so JD Vance is going to start singing a different tune on abortion. And I guess the media is going to help him sell it to you. But we have to remember these quotes. We have to remember what we are dealing with. We have to remember that they say one thing and do another. And by do another, I mean implement abortion bans that keep pregnant people stuck in situations that they don't want to be in, whether it's an abusive relationship, poverty, or simply not wanting to have a child. No one should be stripped of the freedom to create the life they see for themselves. And it's time the media stepped up and informed us all of what we're really facing, because it isn't JD Vance's beard that's the problem. It's everything else. And people's fundamental freedoms and well-being are at stake. What do you think? I'd love to know. You can call 657-464-7609, or you can send an email to idoubt@dollemore.com. You can support this work by going to patreon.com/idoubtitpodcast, or you can become a channel member like these beautiful new channel members that I'm going to thank right now. Leslie Yu, Dreamer S, and Larry P. Thank you so much for your support. I appreciate it so much. Let me know in the comments what you think of this video, what you think of JD Vance, and what you want to hear me talk about next. Take care, and I will see you next time.